Hi, I'm Steve Alter. I'm a professor emeritus at the University of San Francisco. And today I'm going to talk about facets of work, which is an idea that might be useful for helping people analyze and design systems and organizations. These books behind me are actually from a chateau in France, but imagine that instead that they contained all of the knowledge that has ever been written down about information systems and organizations. For instance, every article that's ever been written about information systems and every book that's ever been written about information systems and related topics. How can we make that knowledge as available as possible to people who are trying to analyze and design systems? So the presentation is about facets of work as a source of knowledge and insight for requirements determination. And the goal is to make IS-related knowledge readily available to people who are analyzing and designing systems. And that includes hundreds of papers about decision-making, communication, coordination, and so on. The approach is an extension of work system theory, and the new idea is facets of work. Here's the definition of work system. It's simpler to just look at the work system framework, which basically expresses that definition. It says that a work system is people and or machines, that is, participants in the work system and or the technologies in the work system, performing processes and activities using information technology and other resources to produce product services for customers. Those are the customers of the work system. All of that happens inside of an environment that includes the organization's politics and practices and history and the demographics and the technological change and so on. All of it uses resources from infrastructure that is shared with other work systems in the organization. And perhaps there are strategies. And that gives you 9 elements for thinking about any work system. MBA students have succeeded in using those ideas, as I'll say in a second. So basically, the idea of work system more broadly is what I call the work system perspective. And the work system perspective has a core, which is the definition of work system, the work system framework that I just showed you, and the work system life cycle model, which explains how work systems change over time. That core has led to a series of extensions, such as axioms and design principles and stuff about workarounds and system interactions and service and so on. And today we're going to talk about one of the extensions. It's a new extension called facets of work. These ideas have been applied very informally at first and more formally later through something that was called the work system method, which is a systems analysis method for business professionals. Many hundreds of MBA and executive MBA students have used it to think about a business situation, conceptualize it as a work system, and explain how that work system might be improved. The ideas in the work system method have generated some tools that are all related to work systems and can also be used as a lens for many topics, such as socio-technical systems, ERP, outsourcing, digitalization, and so on, because every one of those situations can be viewed through a work system lens. Now, there's a limitation of the work system framework. The limitation is that there's no direct link to knowledge about facets of work. The work system framework says that the work is done through processes and activities, but it doesn't say anything about decision-making or communicating or coordinating or controlling execution or improvising or other facets of work. Now, there's a great deal of knowledge related to facets of work. And let's look at just one example. This is decision-making. So when we look at decision-making, there are many associated concepts, such as decision criteria and alternatives and expected value and risk and so on. There are evaluation criteria, such as likely outcomes, best case and worst case, riskiness, clarity, and so on. There are design trade-offs, such as speed versus depth of analysis, complexity versus understandability, brevity versus omission of important details. When you think about decision-making, you often tend to break it down into defining the problem, identifying decision criteria, gathering relevant information, analyzing the information. Those are subfacets of the facet that's called decision making. And for decision making, there are fairly obvious open-ended questions that people might ask to start a discussion, such as how do the available methods and information help in making the decisions in this situation? Now, this is the first facet, and that facet has a lot of ideas associated with it. So when we think about any facet of work, first of all, these ideally should be applicable both to socio-technical and totally automated systems. For instance, decision-making happens in totally automated systems just as it happens in socio-technical systems. A facet of work should be directly related to concepts and generalizations. And I just showed you concepts and generalizations related to decision-making. There should be evaluation criteria and design trade-offs, just as I showed you. There should be useful subfacets that could be used in looking in more depth at the ideas for a particular facet. There should be open-ended questions. Facets of work systems may overlap. For instance, decision-making and communication could overlap. I mean, they do overlap in various ways because most decision-making involves communication. On the other hand, when we're thinking about decision-making, there are a series of concepts and generalizations that are specifically about decision-making and not about communicating. There are evaluation criteria that are specifically about decision-making and not about communicating. Now, I sat down and I tried to think of like, what really were the facets of work that seemed to be the relevant facets of work that I knew about and in relation to the systems that I've seen. And I came up with a list of 18. Now, this was done iteratively, and there's a long story about that, which I'm not going to bore you with. But anyway, I came up with 18. And I've showed this to people, and some people say, well, why don't you just give me 3? 18 seems too many. And actually, there's a lot of knowledge about decision making. There's a lot of knowledge about communicating. There's a lot of knowledge about processing information. There's a lot of knowledge about thinking. I could read each of these and I could say there's a lot of knowledge about that. How can we bring some of that knowledge to the forefront when people are analyzing and designing systems so that that knowledge would be helpful to them? That's the question that we've got. So it's not so much a question of whether these are the right 18 facets. Other people might have other lists of 23 facets or 14. It's the idea of we should have facets of work as part of the way we think about analysis and design. They should be present. How can we do something with that? Just to check and make sure that these ideas actually made sense, I looked at a case study called Why Doctors Hate Their Computers. And this was written by a surgeon, Atul Gawande. And so I went through it and I said, well, let's see if those facets are actually present. And sure enough, there were some comments about making decisions and some comments about communicating and some about processing information and some about thinking and so on. And almost every one of the facets was represented in a fairly direct way. So something like communicating. Well, doctors have to communicate all the time, but what about communication through messages? Well, one physician said that her inbox was clogged to the point of dysfunction by messages from patients, radiology colleagues, administrators, and so on. 90% were erased. Now, whoever was designing that system probably had not thought about some of those problems related to communicating. And we could go through every one of these points, but we just don't have time right now. So here's the last slide. How can we apply facets of work? The first thing is in requirements determination, the goal in applying facets of work is to facilitate exploration and discussion, identify potentially relevant facets, highlight the issues related to those facets, so not all 18, whichever ones seem really relevant to a particular situation, and look at the issues as deeply as useful. To help, there can be a series of different tools. There could be an online app that shows the information, that shows the knowledge. There could be a set of cards. People have used cards for doing Agile. There could be paper checklists. So there are many ways of handling tools. In relation to Agile development, this could be used as a way of focusing on more than just software. And it's kind of lightweight. All you got to do is you have to say, here we are, Let's think about the facets of work. Let's identify the ones that are important. Let's think about whether those facets of work are adequately addressed in what we're doing. This could be relevant to empirical research and process mining, because it allows you to look beyond just saying what are the process steps. It could also be used in organizing knowledge in general. And one of the interesting points, and this is the last point, is maybe it would be worthwhile to look at facets of work systems, not just facets of work. Facets of work are about processes and activities, and I found 18 of them that I think are relevant. It could be that if we looked at facets of work systems and looked at all of the different parts of the work system framework, we could get a much richer view of systems analysis and design. Well, thank you for listening. I hope this has been interesting. If you have any questions or comments, please get back to me.